Hello and welcome to this session. My name is Jonathan Passmore, and this session with Lyra Puspa is on the brain and coaching. I'm really delighted to welcome Lyra from Indonesia to talk to us about her research on neuroscience and coaching. Lyra is currently not only the president and founder of Vanaya, which is a leadership and coaching organization in Indonesia, but is also currently engaged in a doctoral research project in the UK in Canterbury, looking at neuroscience and the role that the brain plays in leadership and in coaching. And is going to be sharing today some of her research, which is leading edge, and no doubt will be things that you'll be reading about in journals in the next year or two. But you get it first here on the conference. For those of you who are connecting to our session for the first time, just a few little instructions to start off with before we start with the session. So you might see the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you click onto that, there's an opportunity during the presentation to ask questions, and what I'll be doing as the host for the session is gathering those together and asking Lyra those questions at the end of the presentation, so she has an opportunity to respond to those and you get some answers. But we also are running an online platform on LinkedIn for you to raise questions and connect with Lyra and myself, so you can connect with us as individuals, send us an invitation, and also join the BPS special group in coaching psychology group, where you can meet with fellow participants at the conference and other speakers, and of course engage with discussions with Lyra's and Sean and the other speakers that we have during the course of today. So make use of those platforms, and I'm sure many of you are already members of the British Psychological Society special group in coaching psychology. If not, you may want to connect with us and join the group. Find out more about that. Just Google us and find out the details about how to join, get access to our journals and other events. So without further ado, Lyra, I'm really delighted to welcome you to today's event, and I'm fascinated to hear the latest of what you've been working on as part of your research into neuroscience and coaching.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan, for your energetic introductions as usual. And it is very kind of you to invite me to speak in this wonderful conference among other global experts and also highly respected senior practitioners in coaching psychology. I'm truly honored. So please allow me to appreciate you and also the British Psychological Society for your endeavor to organize such amazing event. Thank you. So, well, everyone, good morning. And for some of you also, good afternoon and good evening. I'm grateful to be here today with all of you to share some of our ideas, thoughts, and also research works at Vanaya regarding the brain and coaching in creating multidimensional change for a more sustainable world. So my name is Lyra Puspa. You can call me Lyra or Lyra, will be the same. Okay, I'm on LinkedIn if you want to get contact with me. I'm from Indonesia. So if you know Indonesia, do you know? It is the largest archipelago in the world. It is located in Southeast Asia, so between Singapore and Australia. So for most of you probably now is around 10 a.m., especially in UK, right? But here in Jakarta, Indonesia, we are at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So I'm invited to just enjoy the presentations, and it's an opening ideas. You can comment, we can discuss, you can agree or you cannot agree. So it's kind of opening up our mind, and that from our research studies. So I'm the founder of and president of the Vanaya Co. We are a coaching company, especially we're focusing on organizational development and transformations using brain-focused coaching and neurotechnology. So what it means that we measure the impact of our solutions and coaching interventions, not only through observable behavioral change or measurable business impact, but also through the scientific impact that we can observe in the brain, the coaching impact in the brain using quantitative EEG technology, what we called neurometrics. So we developed neurometrics to measure the coaching impact in the brain, and all the coaching techniques that we use is also tested using this neuroscientific approach. So I'm a combination of a coach as well as a researcher, a scientist, and also a long life learner. As a coach, I coach mostly corporate leaders, executives, and also, family business owners. But as a scientist and learner, I'm passionately developed research divisions in Vanaya called Vanaya Neurolab, where we conduct applied neuroscience studies in coaching, leadership, innovations, cultures, and even marketing. And some of our research will be presented here today for you. I'm also still pursuing my PhD PhD degree in applied neuroscience in business and organizations in Canterbury Graduate University. So first of all, before we talk further about how is coaching and brain and what is the impact on the brain, let's start with the coaching and change first. Okay, so as coaches, we all know that coaching is all about facilitating change and growth. Okay, and and also we know that to facilitate our coaches to achieve the goal and have the expected behavioral change, we evoke new awareness within them. So inviting the emergence of the will, the internal motivation to change, and the way, how actually the action steps that they will take to start the changing process. And then we can observe the behavioral change after the coaching sessions, or even during a period of a coaching process. Okay, and then interestingly, even before we can see the behavioral change or the change in the behavior of our coachees, even during in the coaching session itself, when we evoke this new awareness, we can sense whether a new awareness is happening during a coaching conversations through noticing a tiny shift in many areas. So we have like this is like 8 aspects, but you can add more aspects that we can observe during a coaching sessions. For example, we can also observe whether there is change in their aspirations or their visions expanding. Okay, do they have bigger visions even during the conversation as they speak? And then do they show any perceptual shift? For example, in the beginning of the coaching sessions, they probably perceive some cases or as problems, but in the middle or by the end of the coaching sessions, they shift their perceptions, so they perceive it more into a challenge or even opportunity. Okay, we can see shifting like that, right? And also we can notice the shift of emotions, whether they change, they show slight changes in emotional intensity for certain emotions, or they can even switch from one emotions to another emotions, like from sadness to content, or even to joy and excitement, right? And we can also notice whether any shift in their motivation level or motivation directions. For example, like previously they're kind of more externally motivated, and then during the conversations they shifted into more internally motivated. But and we can also notice whether there are new awareness emerging in the conversation when we notice a tiny shift in their language pattern, or they have different gestures, or even postures, or they change their voice, their tonality, or even their ambience and energy and their breath, for example, right? And this is called the micro aspect of change, what I called, okay? And the behavioral is the macro change, and this one is the micro changes that we can observe. But still, either the macro behavioral change or these tiny micro changes during coaching is still observable using our naked eye. But what about the change that happens in the brain of our coaches, even during coaching sessions or after a serial of coaching sessions? And what is changed actually from brain science perspective? Okay. So before we talk further about brain and change, and what is changed from the brain perspective, let's meet our brain first, okay? So this is our brain, okay? That's me holding an actual preserved human brain. So our brain is like this, okay? This big, this size. It's about 2.5 to 3% of our body weight. Okay, so it's not that heavy, but it consumes 20% of our energy. So our brain is kind of like high energy absorbent organ. So no wonder when we think hard, or we think too much, or when we engage in some kind of challenging mental task like calculating math or statistics or even calculus, we feel exhausted and sometimes hungry, because when our brain works hard, it consumes so much energy, a lot of energy from our body. And if you can see here, here is the anatomical version of our brain. From the outer part, there is a wrinkled layer in the outer part of our brain called a neocortex, which consists of 4 big chunks. The first is the frontal lobe in the frontal of our brain, and then the parietal lobe in the above the upper part of our head, and then the temporal lobes in the right and the left side of our head, somewhere behind our ears. And then there is occipital lobe in the back of our head. It is our visions brain, okay? And then from above, we can see that this neocortex is consists of 2 hemispheres, the right and the left part, which is connected by a brain bridge called corpus callosum. So this corpus callosum connects these 2 brains together, and they work as a system together, okay? And but if we slice our brain like this vertically, we can see that below this wrinkled outer part of the brain, below our neocortex, there are many subparts of our brains. For example, we have this in the middle part, we have the limbic system that consists of many subsystems in it that relates with the making of our emotions, memory, perceptions, and even the radar system that monitors and detect if there's any danger in our surroundings within 24 hours, 7 days per week, nonstop. And also it contributes, this part also contributes to our decision-making process. And there is a small part there, which is called cerebellum in the bottom of our brain that relates with body balance. And then there is a brainstem there in the bottom of our brain that connects our brain with our spine, and it relates with the wakefulness and conscious, also reflex. Okay, and if we slice our brain in that way, okay, we can see that in the outer part and the wrinkled part, we have the gray matter areas, which is the locations of the body of the soma of our neuron cells, okay? And then in the middle part, we have the white matters, which is the locations of axon and dendrites, the hand and the leg of our neurons that connect our one neurons to another, okay? And the white color comes from the fatty ingredients of the myelin that covers the axon and dendrites that allows information to be transferred very fast from one neuron to another. So, but this is still in the physical and anatomical perspective. But our brain is more than this, because when you see like this, the regional, the locations, the parts, the physical brain as a physical being or a physical organs. Some of you, I received many questions like this. For example, when we coach a client or a coachee, and then they got this aha moment, which part of the brain that sparked when they have the insight or solutions, or when they got this awareness, which part of the brain that lighten up? Okay, that kind of questions I received many times. But our brain doesn't work that way. It is not only physical structure. Our brains also works as a system, as a functions, as a network like this. Okay, so this is the different perspective of our brain. And on the right picture, you can see this very beautiful, colorful strings there. It is our neural pathways. It's some kind of like a road or a highway where our chemical molecules can transfer from one part to another part in our brain. Okay, and in the center, okay, you can see this blue circuit. So it is kind of interconnected networks that was built by the electrical flow from one nodes of the brain to another. So our brain has this chemical reactions, and it has also electrical flow and through a circuitry like this. And on the right side, on the right picture, you can see many nodes there, small and bigger parts. It's kind of it shows it is the activated neurons or a group of neurons that is activated during thinking process, or when we do something, or during a particular event in our brain. So these are our brains, okay? And what about the change? Okay, what is change in our brains? I mean, like, well, as you know, we as coaches sometimes found that it is not easy to facilitate sustainable change in the behavior of our coaches, right? So this is actually the part of the brain that, and a system of the brain that relates with the making of habit. So you can see this, like tiny part, like the, it's like curled like that in the middle of our brain, the purple part, So yeah. This is called basal ganglia. This part is part of the limbic system that relates with the conversions of a particular behavior into a habit. So when we learn to drive at the first time, we need to put our effort and attentions and energy just to do it right, okay? But once the basal ganglia took over the process of driving in our brain, driving becomes easier for us, and it becomes very, very natural and eventually automatic. So basal ganglia is the part of our brain that helps us to build an autopilot system, like habit, and even like belief systems, okay? And but basal ganglia functions, it has a functions, have a double sword impact. So in one side, it saves our energy, so that when we do some behavior or to do something that is already autopilot, like eating or like driving or like riding a bike, okay, or riding with our dominant hand, for example, we can do it very easily, very naturally, without effort at all. So we can put our attention to more important things, okay? Imagine how exhausted we are if we have to use all our effort and attention and conscious energy, okay, just to talk or to walk every time, right? But on the other hand, because this autopilot mode is very, very convenient and effortless, we are, to a certain extent, or feel uncomfortable to change our habit. Why? Because our brains perceive a habitual change, an autopilot habitual change, as a threat that causes pain, okay? So our brain detects it as a pain. And study shows that our brain detects any socio-emotional pain in a similar way with physical pain. So our brain loves our comfortable autopilot habit and hate change, okay? That's why changing our habits is very hard for everyone, including me, including you, okay? Including our coaches. So, but the good news is that our brain can change, and the capacity of our brain to change itself is called neuroplasticity. So it works like this. So the neuroplasticity mechanism works like this. So if we do a behavior in a certain period of time and becoming a habit, then those behaviors or those habits change our brain, and vice versa. If we change if there is some change in our brain functions, it will be reflected in our state of behavior. So knowing that our brain can be seen from various perspectives, from functional, from also a systemic and circuitry, there are actually 3 kinds of change in our brains through this neuroplasticity. The first is the chemical change. So when we feel that our mood is changed, or we experience a shift in our emotional state, it means that our neurochemical balance is changing. For example, if we feel excited, joyful, excitement, it means that at that time, our dopamine level is increasing, okay? But if we feel stressed, okay, and we feel overwhelmed and burned out, it means that our cortisol level is increased. So emotions, moods is actually never a changing pattern of the chemical balance in our brain. And also, second is the functional change. So for example, when the level of connectivity, the connectivity of the network in our frontal lobe is getting lower, so it gets less connected between the nodes in the frontal part of our brain, it means that our capacity of complex reasoning is going stronger, okay? And finally, the third is the structural change, the physical change. One study shows that when we practice some kind of instrument, for example, piano, okay, regularly, every day, then the size of our motoric cortex here will expand after a week, okay? But the same study also shows interesting finding that if we imagined to play or exercise piano, even without moving our finger part at all, just imagine it in our mind, okay, every day, regularly, then our motoric cortex also pan in the same way after a week. So it is very interesting because we can see that imaginations or visioning can change our brain. And as coaches, we facilitate and we use imaginations and visionings a lot in our coaching sessions, right? Okay, so it's very important for us. So knowing that our brain can change itself and knowing that we have the capacity um, of self changes through neuroplasticity, what does it mean? And how does that relate with coaching? Okay. So while I'm actually inviting you to think about a brain-focused coaching approach. So brain-focused coachings, as I called it, is kind of coaching approach that deliberately focus to harness or optimize or alter targeted or specific brain functions to induce neuroplasticity. So from the brain perspectives, coaching is actually the some kind of a method for brain optimizations, okay, or even brain alterations. So powerful questions during coaching that we ask to our coaches can rewire the brain in a different way compared to where they rewire their brain itself without coaching sessions. So as I have mentioned earlier, coaching facilitates behavioral change through evoking awareness, like this. Okay, this kind of the pattern that we actually use when we coach clients, right, or a coachee. But imagine that instead of focusing directly to evoke their awareness, what if we as a coach could focus on stimulating or even altering specific brain functions that relates with any targeted change that is expected, okay? It is not impossible. I mean, that just think about it, okay? I mean, when we as coaches deliberately focus to activate certain brain functions, targeted specific brain functions that relates with certain change, okay, or targeted change, these functional activations may influence the coach's mind and eventually may induce new awareness and evoke internal motivation to change and eventually foster the targeted change to occur. And for example, like, and then let's take a look some specific brain functions, okay? For example, let's see the specific brain functions that relates with the motivation to change, okay? Just for the session's discussions. So what is motivations or drive in our brain? In neuroscience, there are two brain mechanisms of motivations, which is called wanting and liking, okay? Wanting is when you really, really want or need or even crave something or to do something. And the wanting mechanism is associated with delta beta activities and dopaminergic system in our brain. So which is our natural morphine pathways in our brain, okay? And then what is liking? Liking is when you enjoy consuming or doing something, and it relates with the beta gamma activities between 20 to 35 hertz of our brainwave, and hedonic hotspots, which is our natural opium pathways in our brain. So both wanting and liking mechanisms are our reward system, how our brain works when we really want or like something, when we are motivated to do something. And it is addictive because it relates with the natural morphine and natural opium mechanism in our brain. And most of the liking and wanting research in neuroscience were conducted in animal and addiction studies. From those studies, it was found that wanting and liking processes are dissociative, like this. So in drug addiction cases, for example, it was found that drug addicts, they can really, really want the drug badly, even though they don't like it as they expected when they actually consume it, okay? And some people enjoy eating sweets or eating much of high cholesterol food and keep eating them so much, even though they don't really need it or are really hungry, right? Interestingly, our preliminary studies found that during coaching, so we measure the brain of the coaches during a coaching sessions when the coach tried to evoke the internal motivations to change, okay? We found that during coaching, the delta and beta gamma bands are increased significantly in the frontal and posterior part of the brain simultaneously. And when we compared the result to the previous neuroscience studies about wanting and liking, it seems that the increased delta and gamma band activities in this pattern in the frontal and posterior parieto-occipital part of our brain indicates the possibility that a coachee may experience wanting and liking mechanisms simultaneously in their brain during a coaching sessions. So probably the motivational mechanisms in our brain through coaching is different than the animal and addiction studies, okay? Because it works simultaneously like this. So this actually makes me wonder if coaching can really activate simultaneous wanting and liking in our brain. So it's kind of double booster of internal motivations, right? How far coaching can induce targeted change. And when the brain functions have changed induced by coaching, I wonder what kind of targeted changes that could possibly happen in our coach's life, okay? So then to answer this curiosity, the past couple of years we conducted 2 randomized controlled trials, or RCT, to examine the coaching impact for diabetes type 2 patients. These clinical trials were collaborative studies between Vanaya Neurolab and the largest medical schools in Indonesia, the Faculty of Medicine of Universitas Indonesia, and also 3 large central hospitals in Jakarta. The aim of these studies is to examine whether brain-focused coaching can facilitate sustainable behavioral change to create significant improvement in their health conditions. So the first RCT involved 6 months coaching sessions, 12 times, okay, in 6 months, conducted by experienced professional coaches who had been certified using a brain-focused coaching approach called the CARE model. And the second RCT involved 3 months coaching sessions. So they received 6 times of coaching and conducted by medical practitioners who were newly certified as coaches using the CARE model. So they have less experience and they just have been certified, okay? So they are doctors, there are the endocrinologists, also nutritionists, and even diabetic educators in the hospitals, okay? And in both studies, we use a brain-focused coaching method that I developed here, the CARE model. So CARE model is both a philosophical concept as well as a coaching framework. As a philosophical concept, CARE means that a coach should facilitate a coaching conversations with care and compassion. And as a coaching framework, a typical coaching sessions using the care model consists of 4 stages, okay? Which are clarity, awakening, resolution, and empowerment. It can be conducted as 4 stages during a coaching, or it can be conducted throughout a period of coaching sessions. Okay, and the first step, the clarity, is when the coach help the coaches to build a clarity of their directions toward their desired goal in the future. Okay, and the awakening is the stage where the coach help the client to find or to discover the big why. I mean, the internal drive or motivations to change. Okay, and the resolutions is a stage when the coach help the coachee to find solutions, or to create an action plan and to decide consciously what to do to start the changing process. And the empowerment is a stage where the coach facilitate the self-empowerment within the coach's mind to ensure they have strong determinations to actually start to implement their plan and decisions until they really reach the goal. Okay, and there are various coaching techniques for each stages tested through QEEG for the impact in the brain, and which are derived from neuroscientific studies. But for and the protocol of the coaching techniques used in these clinical trials were standardized and focused on stimulating or altering particular brain functions that relates with behavioral change for chronic diabetic patients. Okay, and but for these sessions, I would like to focus on the awakening stage of the care model that relates with inducing internal drive through the inductions of a shift in certain brain functions. So how does it work? Okay, in the awakening, awakening stage, when the coach tries to facilitate the patients to discover the big why or their internal drive to change, the coach stimulates many kind of brain functions. So they stimulate or activate a perceptual shift, or they stimulate certain body sensations, or they harness the capacity of episodic memory, or bottom up and top down attentional processing, and many other brain functions. Okay, but in this session, I'll bring you 2 examples of them. First, using interoceptions to discover the why. Interoceptions is a process to access the internal sense of the whole body, including the senses that we experience from our sensory system and the visceral parts within our body, like from the leg and also the heart, the lungs, okay, the intestines, okay? So whenever negative emotions came up in the conversations, the coach helped the coaches or the patients to get in touch with their internal body sense that was related with that particular emotions, okay? And then the coach gave experiential space to the patients to allow them to experience it and relates the emotions to the sensations and reappraise the emotions using their interpretations of the body sensation they experienced, and convert that interpretations to come up with meaning or values or even purpose. Okay, and the second approach, by activating the human ability of mental time travel. So to help the patients to reorganize their episodic memory in order to alter their time perspectives. So in our brain, we actually construct times, okay? So in neuroscience, this mental time travel is the ability that is uniquely for human being. As humans, we can remember the past, okay? So we can go to our past times through our past memory, and then we can enjoy and observe the presence and really experience it, the present moment. But we can also imagine and anticipate the future through our imaginations functions in our brain, even when the future has not yet come. Okay, so animals cannot do it. This capacity makes us able to evaluate the past, observe the present, and prepare for the future. Having these brain functions, then we build we as people tend to build certain time perspectives, okay? People tend to build a past, present, or future-oriented perceptions toward time in their mind. Okay, so in Philip Zimbardo's work, there are 6 categories of time perspective in humans, which are past positive, when people tend to focus on their good memories from their past, okay, from their nostalgia, and then past negative, when people tend to hold on to their bad memories or they're kind of hooked in their past trauma. And also present hedonistic, when people tend to enjoy the present moment. Present fatalistic, when people tend to think that they have no influence or they cannot change the present circumstances. And also we can build our future goal-oriented time perspective when we tend to focus on the future goal attainment. People with future goal-oriented perspective tend to really focus on achievement in the future. And future transcendental, when people tend to focus more to the life after. So these are some examples of the coaching techniques that we used in both studies in the awakening stage within the care model. Then what are the impacts of using this brain-focused coaching approach to the patients? Well, there were several aspects that changed significantly, actually. First, of course, the mental change. In the first RCT, we found that coaching truly improved the quality of life of the patients. So compared to the control group, the patients who received coaching were more, their health state improved, okay? So they feel that they are much healthier than before, okay? Their self-reported questionnaire shows that they feel less depressed, and they are more comfortable to do regular daily activities and have more mobility without so much pain again, okay? And then, of course, in the second RCT, the patient who received coaching have higher level of self-esteem. So there are 2 significant time perceptual shift here. The patient who received coaching in our pre and post study shows that they have decreased score in past negative and present fatalistic. So it means that they tend to think and feel more positive towards their past experience and towards present moment or present challenges. And the negative emotions that they were reduced, okay, when we examine the emotional intensity of the patients, compared intervention group, okay, the negative emotion that were reduced significantly in terms of intensity is the sadness and anger. So those patients who received coaching tend to be less sad and less angry, okay? And then the second is, of course, the behavioral change. We observe what kind of behavioral change that happens after coaching sessions. Our first RCT shows that the coaching improved the medical adherence to the patients. So compared to the control group, the patients who received coaching were more disciplined to do daily self-check for their glucose level. They take medicine regularly, and they tend to visit their doctors more regularly also. Interestingly, there were no significant change of their eating habit, of their daily diet. And compared to the third month, in the sixth month of the coaching sessions and the coaching period, their calorie intake even getting higher. And then there is also no significant change in their sport intensity. So I wonder, without having better diet or more sport, can coaching really create impact in their health, okay, beyond their emotional or mental state, okay? Where thankfully there were indeed significant biological change after coaching. From the first RCT, we found that after 6 month coaching, their diabetic marker HbA1c level dropped significantly compared to the control group. What really amazed us was the fact that Indonesians are mostly Muslims, 80% are Muslims. So 80% of the patients are Muslim as well. So in the fourth and fifth month of the coaching period, the patients who had to deal with 1 full month of Ramadan fasting and also Eid al-Fitr, which actually they have to deal with highly tempting high cholesterol food and high glucose food during the Eid celebrations. But as you can see from the figure, the patients who received coaching showed much higher and better result in the decrease of HbA1c level, and they can keep the HbA1c level within the normal level, below 7% after 6 months, okay? And also, coaching also helps diabetic patients to improve their glucose regulations, either their fasting glucose or their glucose tolerance, compared to the control group who didn't receive any coaching session at all. And these changes happened even when there was no change that we can observe in their eating habit and sport activities. So we wonder whether there were any changes in their brain that cannot be observed by our naked eye. Then finally, we measure the neural change. In the second RCT, we found that the most significant difference in the brain pattern between the patients who received coaching and the control group after 3 months is in the frontal lobe activities. Those who received coaching showed increased activity in the right frontal regions, which is related with anger withdrawal motivations. And those who didn't receive coaching showed increased activity in the left frontal region, which is related with anger approach motivations. Previous study shows that these frontal activities relate closely with the directions of motivations, especially in anger regulations. This brain pattern shows that patients who received coaching can regulate their anger better than the control group. And when we compare the self-reported emotional intensity of the patients, it showed that the coaching, the brain-focused coaching, decreased the anger intensity significantly. While on the contrary, in the control group, they experienced an increased intensity of anger. So they become angrier. And gratefully, okay, our study also showed that after 3 months, patients who received coaching had decreased activities in left delta frontal activity and increased activity of low and high alpha in frontal and right temporoparietal regions in the brain. When we explored previous neuroscientific studies in cognitive functions, what does it mean? This means that these brain pattern changes are associated with improved global cognitive level, improved global attentional readiness, reduced cognitive impairment, and increased white matter volume. Okay, and there are some preliminary indications from our study here that brain-focused coaching may improve the cognitive level and possibly reduce the risk of cognitive impairment for chronic diabetic patients. Of course, we still need further research to examine such indication in a larger populations, but at least from these 2 consecutive studies, we can see that there is a promising possibility that coaching, when specifically focused to stimulate certain brain functions, okay, can induce unobservable changes in our brain, either chemical changes, functional changes in our research here, or even structural changes. These changes may eventually facilitate observable changes in multidimensional aspects, from mental change, behavioral change, and even biological change. So then maybe I'm just offering you an ideas, okay, from these phenomenons. Maybe now it is time for us to see coaching from different perspective. So when our coaches don't show sustained behavioral changes after multiple coaching sessions in a certain period of time, maybe as coaches, we need to focus on altering or shifting some specific brain functions first in their brain. Thank you. So I'm looking forward for your comment or questions. Thank you.
Lyra, thank you very much indeed for sharing some of the details and insights from your research. And it's a fascinating area that I'm sure many of our colleagues who are online are going to ask lots of questions about this. But we're just at the beginning of the exploration around the neuroscience and the connection with coaching. And this whole topic has been talked about for 5 and 10 years in coaching as it's really important, we should pay attention to it, but almost no one has done any research. And so it's great for you to be with us today and sharing some of those preliminary findings, pre-publication, and as you say, very early on from the research, and we do need larger sample sizes. But let's have a look at some of the questions that might be emerging from your presentation. I guess that as I look at some of the questions that have been coming up, one issue was around application and practice, and we were talking with Sean O'Connor earlier and Tony Grant's work of suggestion that, well, of course, all coaching practice involves neuropsychology, neuroscience, and we're all neuro coaches. But if you were going to draw out for us 2 or 3 very practical things that we as coaches might do starting on Monday to pay attention to in our coaching practice that might help us leverage some of your research, what would those 2 or 3 things be?
Okay, so yes, Jonathan, as you mentioned that, and I also agree with Professor Grant that every coaches actually induce certain or many changes in the brain of the coaches, but we don't know which brain functions are really changes, right? We assume that their brain changes, but in what way? But having deeper knowledge about the brain functions, we can we can even design a coaching technique or coaching approach that specifically really focus on altering specific brain functions. So like, for example, like breathing, for example, yeah. So one of the tips, like if we stressed, we tend to use the sympathetic nervous systems, okay, and our cholesterol's increased, okay, our cortisol level increased. And when we coach our client, we can observe their breathing pattern. If they breathe very fast, it means they use the sympathetic nervous system. Then we can invite them to breathe slowly. And it's not a deep breath intake, but more breath exhale. So slow inhale and longer exhale. And then it will shift their sympathetic nervous system quickly to parasympathetic nervous system. And they reduce their cortisol level, and they reduce their stress level, and their brain can, they can be unhooked from this amygdala hijack in their brain, and they can start to think clearly. So that's one example. So that's just observing the breathing pattern of our client. But we can also see from the gestures. For example, if our clients use the gesture that is dominant with their right hands or right part of the brain, it means they're dominantly thinking from the left side of the brain. They're very detailed. So if they tend to be think in detail, invite them to think from the global perspectives. So think globally, what does it mean from above? So it will shift their brain patterns significantly at that time. It is not easy for them. So be patient, because it is not their habit. So you may try to do it in several coaching sessions to make them familiar to shift their thinking pattern from detail to broad perspective. That's two examples that very, very practical to start.
That's great, Lyra. Thank you very much indeed. And maybe we've got time for one more question, which is around time travel perspectives in coaching. And I know that two of my colleagues, Patricia Bosson and Patricia Riddell from the University of Reading Henley Business School, have written about this in the neuroscience of coaching. But maybe you could just share with us a little bit more detail about, again, at a practical level, how colleagues who are on the call could take this away and apply this come next week with clients online.
Well, I really love to share this, because this is my PhD research. I'm doing the PhD research in altering the harnessing their mental time travel ability to shift their time perspective through shifting their mental timeline. So during the age of 3 to 5, we start to exercise our mental time travel ability, and we develop a mental timeline. Unconsciously, we develop unconscious mental timeline in our brain. So, and that really relates and then form our perspective towards time and eventually towards our life. Okay, with either we are unconsciously built our tendency to see our life from present-oriented thinking, or future-oriented thinking, or even past-oriented thinking. And in our research, it is actually my PhD research. The coaches actually deliberately try to facilitate the coachee, invite them to rearrange their memories and imaginations in the form of pictures or videos, and they can rearrange their mental timeline that is unconsciously formed since their childhood to conscious pattern that they really want. And then the result is very, very impressive. I mean, that's the first time they have this new awareness. That's the first time they can see life differently. So when they can see life differently from different perspective, for example, unconsciously they see their bad memories in front of them, and then they consciously can put those memories behind them, behind their head, for example, they can decide, they have the power to choose whatever they want in their life, and they have this new insights, there's new perspective toward their lives, and that's amazing. So you can also try to do that.
Thank you, Lyra, for that. As we come towards an end, let me thank you, Lyra, for that fantastic presentation about your research at Canterbury, and we're looking forward to some of those publications emerging. Yes. Thank you very much indeed for
papers.
Yes, indeed. So hopefully we're going to be able to publish some of your work in the International Coaching Psychology Review. But I also hope colleagues who have listened into the presentation from you this morning are really fascinated and interested by research and evidence-based practice. So an encouragement for all of you who are listening in live, but also on the recording. If you're interested and fascinated and are not a member of the British Psychological Society Special Group in Coaching, then connect to us, join, and you get access to the journal and other events such as this. So from me, do connect to me and to Lyra on LinkedIn, connect to the group to ask us some further questions, and the recording will be available online after the conference and after we've edited each of these sessions. So thank you, Lyra. Thank you all for connecting. Look forward to you at the next session.
It is an honor for me to be here. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you all the team, Tia and Rijal as well, and the British Psychological Society. Thank you, all of you. It's a pleasure for me to share, and please, I'm open for any connections or emails or LinkedIn connections. See you.